I won't teach my kid that it's good sense to buy a saddle with a whole lot of silver on it and gadgets that make me look better in the show ring. That's not the right kind of education for young people, as I see it. So that's where I think the ranch horse versatility is one of the aspects of its popularity. Is they actually discourage some of those things and make it showier. And I appreciate that, because I'm like my dad, I'm sort of a tightwad.
Well, I think we can all remember, you know, Frank's talking about the 1960s and so on, the 70s. In western Kansas, we had a circuit of shows.
Yeah.
Every little town, you know, had their own show.
Yeah.
All volunteer help. We went out and begged and tried to steal people to donate trophies. And the day of the show, you know, you had a volunteer announcer, you had volunteers in the concession stand, you know, everybody. And they pitched in, and we'd draw people from, you know, who knows wherever. They got to thinking that here's these podunk guys down here, we can go beat them. And they did. I mean, they'd come in, and they'd come from you know, all over the country, especially when the trailer races started, when they started showing horses all over the country. I would tell one little story. I think I told you the other day. It sticks in my mind. There was a show at Oakley, Kansas, and we had a run of shows: Oakley, Scott City, Dighton, Leota, blah 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 blah. You know, all around. And but one day in specific, and I was in the arena taking pictures, so I can tell you this is a fact. But I don't know how many remember. I shouldn't mention names, but I'm going to. Stretch Bradley.
Oh, yeah.
And he was showing a mare called Gold Margarita. And at that time, she was the high point halter mare in the country. And so he led her in that day in the aged mare halter class, and she got second. And he went up to the judge and he said, I don't know who the judge was now, but he said, well, do you know who this horse is? And the judge said, no, I don't. And he said, well, this is Gold Margarita. She's leading halter horse in the country. He said, well, I guess this wasn't her day, was it? One of the things I just briefly, you talk about the changes from then to now. The photography equipment has increased dramatically. You've all told your kids or your grandkids stories about, you know, we had to walk uphill to school both ways, you know, in the snow, against the wind. Well, we had to buy film, load the camera. We had to advance the pictures one at a time. I don't know anything about the camera this gentleman has here, but it looks very sophisticated. And, you know, we were reliant on good weather. The sun was our friend. No wind was our friend. And the pictures that we did there, we didn't have the versatility to do what the photographers do today. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I get the Quarter Horse Journal occasionally, and I look at those pictures, and I see a lot of headshots up close, and I'm thinking, how do you evaluate a horse by looking in his muzzle? Because some of them are just, you know, in your face.
Yeah.
Well, they do that for a reason. And one thing I learned, when you're out there trying to please a customer, you want to do what they want to do. And at Holiday Ranch was one example, and there were several others. But I would ask people, you know, would you like to do something a little scenic or creative? No, we want to do it just like that. And so that you're kind of kept in a rigid position, and a lot of times those trends follow. And I'm sure if you went to a farm today, they'd say, we want a headshot just like these others. And just my analysis, what we tried to do was show the overall balance of the horse. Whether it was a side view, which is the easiest to, well, no, it's the hardest extra to hide an unfavorable feature. But we tried to show the whole horse instead of just one little. We've got head shots and we got front shots and so on. But today, what I see, and I'm not being critical because the trends change, like Craig said. They're focused on a more upscale, high-profile. I don't know what right word to use, but it's not a natural look the way I see it anyway.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Right or wrong. it's changed dramatically, and I have thought about buying a really good high-speed camera and so on, and I thought, you know, I have a hard time working my cell phone, so I don't think that would probably be the thing I need to do.
You know, the wind photos at the world shows and some of those, they're still kind of that same three-quarter body shot or whatever. Those, other than the digital equipment that you're mentioning, why those shots have stayed kind of the same, but the advertising and the glamour shots certainly are different. I'm going to throw this at each one of you. Is there a particular horse that in your lifetime you felt has influenced you more than any other in your equine endeavors? And I'm sure that I already know that your answer, Frank. But
I bet you do too. Just to add to that, a few years ago I'm at a ranch rodeo that we did at the Coliseum, and some of you will know who Dean Williamson is, Forrest Williamson's son, capable hand. I see him over here in the distance, and he comes to me and he says, "Mr. Tinker Red McHugh." And that horse gave me the opportunity to learn, compete, and do well enough to survive. And he became a champion, and like I say, he sired champions. And so yeah, he got me off to a good start. And truly, when I bought him, I paid $400 for him and his mother. And I thought, that colt could be an AQHA champion. And he did become one. And it was strictly him and I. And he wasn't a great horse, but he was a good one, and an athlete. And we did okay. Had a lot of fun. One time I used to, well, I had a family started, and I'm going to DeSoto, Kansas, to a horse show. So I had a little two-man tent and a half-ton pickup and a bumper hitch trailer and Tinker Red McHugh. And we get to town a little before dark. I go to the grounds where the arena is or was, and I jackknifed my pickup and trailer and got a picnic table and made a corral for Tinker Red McHugh. And I laid on didn't need my tent, laid on the picnic table and slept. And I woke up early the next morning. He was raising cane. A horsefly was after him, and he made a circle and kicked my driver's side door latch off. But anyway, we just did it together, him and I. And to me, it's hard to beat going that route.
a lot of memories.
Yep, yep.
Richard?
Well, he's talking about the good old days, you know. First year out of high school, I went to Iowa to race 2 harness horses with 59 El Camino and a right top trailer. And got up there and slept in the barn, but that was normal. That's what we did, you know. And didn't have a driver's license, so I couldn't drive my own horse. And none of the old timers, they didn't know me. They wouldn't drive my horse for me, so I had to get a guy that just got his license. And we got all right. But the next town I went to, an old man came up to me and says, "I saw your horses, they're all right." He says, "I'll drive for you now." And he went out and won a couple of races for me right there in Colquitt, Missouri. But it's, that was, like you said, that's a good old time. Yeah. And I've had harness horses ever since. But once I got them broke and trained and going, I'd take them to Illinois and have somebody racing for me, you know, and hopefully get them sold and make some money. And it just so happens, this is another one of my favorite stories, is
that's what we're here for.
Well, I was training a horse at Winfield, and they wouldn't let me use the track because of the flood. So I take it out at Ralph Fox's, and I drive it around and stuff on the gravel roads, and that wasn't very successful. So I called a friend of mine in Illinois, and I says, "Would you race this mare for me?" And he said, "No, my son will. He's 16, he needs to drive some." I didn't want to, but I said, okay. Well, when that kid turned 18, he got to drive at the pari-mutuel tracks, and he won his first race with my horse, and he's now the leading trainer in the world. He's won as much as $19 million a year. His name's Tim Tetrick. His brother's in the top 10 also and drives and stuff. But anyway, I kind of live my life through him now. I watch the harness horse races about every night. But that, shoeing the harness horses and stuff, really helped me shoeing the quarter horses, because when I started shoeing quarter horses, basically it's 4 steel shoes. You know, just put them on and protect the foot, and that was all. And of course, I tried saddlebreds. You had to make handmade shoes and punch the deep holes and everything, drive the high nails. But when I started shoeing the quarter horses, you know, some of those Mr. Pressy, or a lot of his colts didn't have any heel. You know, so I thought, well, I'm gonna, Mr. MBJ West is a world champion halter horse, but he's always got his heels down. So I put some wedged aluminums, and back then you couldn't buy them. I made handmade wedged aluminum shoes to raise his heel up. Boy, they looked good. And Bruce was proud of me, you know. And he goes, Bruce Walt was, he goes to the show and comes back, and the first thing he did is say, "Get those shoes off that horse. They think he's crippled because he got aluminums on." Well, now, if you know anything about it, they've all got aluminums on. I mean, you can't win without them. So times change, yeah.
You haven't mentioned, because they weren't yours particularly, but you shot a lot of good quarter horse racehorses too. Let's talk
Charlie Hunt was about the only.
Talk a little bit about that.
About the only racehorse guy, but it really worked out great because he's gone all summer to the races, and everything else kind of slowed down in the summer there. So I had time for my other customers, and then in the winter when everything else kind of slows down, he's home breaking. Back then at 45 head of yearlings or something like that. He's down to a dozen now, but and I followed him to Texas and to Iowa and Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma twice a week a lot of times to shoot his racehorses. And he had 2 world champion running quarter horses. Juno's Request was the world champion age mare, and Rare Bar was the world's champion age stallion. And great experience.